The rhythmic rumble of the subway car suddenly gave way to chaos. "Get on the ground! Hands where I can see them!" The harsh command sliced through the crowded evening commute, turning heads and freezing conversations mid-sentence. Marcus Johnson, just 15 years old, stood paralyzed, his box of candy bars tumbling from his trembling hands. Chocolate bars, caramels, and lollipops scattered across the grimy subway floor as two uniformed police officers towered over him. Their badges caught the flickering fluorescent light as they reached for their handcuffs. Marcus's voice cracked as he tried to speak. "Sir, I was just—" But his words dissolved into a choked sob as the cold metal clasped around his thin wrists. A middle-aged woman with highlighted blonde hair, styled in an asymmetrical bob, stood several feet away, her arms crossed in satisfaction, phone still clutched in her manicured hand. Her lips curled into what could almost be mistaken for a smile as she watched the officers press the teenager against the subway car door. "I told you people can't just do whatever you want," she announced loudly enough for the entire car to hear. "There are rules in this city." Passengers watched in stunned silence as a $5 bill floated near the emergency exit door, carried by the gust of wind from the tunnel. More crumpled bills and loose change lay scattered around Marcus's feet, representing hours of work and hope. A red-haired college student in the corner raised her phone, the camera lens catching the entire scene. The train lurched forward, and somewhere in the back of the car, a child asked, "Mommy, why are they arresting the candy boy?" 3 hours earlier, Marcus had stood before the bathroom mirror in his family's small apartment, carefully counting out the candy bars he had purchased wholesale from Mr. Diaz's convenience store. Each one represented potential profit money that was desperately needed. The mirror reflected his serious expression, brown eyes focused intently on his task, shoulders already carrying a weight no 15-year-old should bear. The apartment was quiet, except for the occasional wheezing cough from his mother's bedroom. Angela Johnson had been diagnosed with lupus 2 years ago, but the recent flare-up had been the worst yet. The medical bills had piled up faster than the small family could manage on her disability checks. When she'd been forced to reduce her hours at the community health clinic, where she worked as a receptionist, their precarious financial situation had become critical. Marcus had watched his mother's face grow more drawn each day, her eyes more sunken, even as she tried to maintain her warm smile for his benefit. "You've got homework to do, baby," she had said yesterday when she caught him counting the money in his old basketball trophy. "Don't you worry about the bills." But Marcus had seen the past due notices. He had overheard the hushed phone conversations with the insurance company. He knew the refrigerator held little more than condiments and a half-gallon of milk. His mother's prescription had run out 3 days ago, and the refill would cost $87 they didn't have. So he had withdrawn the $200 he'd been saving for new basketball shoes and taken the bus to the wholesale district downtown. "You sure about this, kid?" Mr. Diaz had asked, as he boxed up the assorted candy. "Those transit cops don't play around." Marcus had nodded, his jaw set with determination. "I'm sure, sir. My cousin Jerome made almost $50 in one afternoon last month." What he didn't mention was that Jerome had also been given a warning by a sympathetic transit officer who had caught him between stations. "Just be careful," Mr. Diaz had said, slipping an extra pack of chocolate bars into the box. "Don't make it too obvious." After organizing his inventory into the old backpack his uncle had given him for Christmas, Marcus had written a note for his mother, "Gone to study at Jerome's. Back before dinner. Love you." It wasn't a complete lie. He would stop at Jerome's afterward to divide up the day's earnings and return the unsold candy. His cousin had agreed to let Marcus use his supplier discount, though he'd warned him to stick to the less monitored stations. Your mom finds out. Don't you dare tell her I helped. Jerome had texted, Aunt Angela would have my head. For the first 2 hours, things had gone surprisingly well. Marcus had moved between 3 different subway lines, offering candy to tired commuters who often purchased the treats out of convenience or, occasionally, sympathy for the earnest teenager with the gentle sales pitch. Candy bars, $2 each. Help support my basketball team. It wasn't the complete truth, but it wasn't a complete lie either. He did play basketball, and he did need support. Most people smiled. Some ignored him. A few purchased candy while advising him to be careful. By 5:30, he had sold nearly half his inventory and made just over $60 in profit. The prescription was within reach. If he could sell for another hour, maybe his mother wouldn't have to choose between medication and electricity this month. That's when he had boarded the Blue Line heading downtown during rush hour, a rookie mistake. As Jerome would later point out, the car had been packed with commuters, many wearing business attire and bearing the irritated expressions of people eager to get home after a long workday. Marcus had moved carefully through the crowd, making his sales pitch in a respectful, hushed tone to avoid drawing too much attention. Excuse me, ma'am. Would you like to buy some candy? $2 each. The woman with the blonde bob had been standing near the door, scrolling through her phone with an annoyed expression when Marcus approached her. She'd looked up from her device, her eyes narrowing as they traveled from his face to the box of candy and back again. Do you have a permit to sell on the subway? She asked sharply, her voice carrying over the rumble of the train. Marcus had felt his stomach drop, but he maintained his composure. No, ma'am. Just trying to make some extra money for... So you're conducting business illegally on public transportation? She interrupted, her volume increasing. Several nearby passengers shifted uncomfortably, but no one intervened. You people think you can just ignore the rules everyone else has to follow. The phrase "you people" hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Marcus had taken a step back, feeling the weight of unwanted attention from the entire car. I'm sorry to have bothered you, he said quietly, turning to move away. Don't walk away when I'm speaking to you, the woman had snapped, grabbing his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her nails digging into his skin through his thin jacket. I'm tired of these constant violations. Do you know how many times I've complained about illegal vendors to the transit authority? Please let go of me, Marcus had said, his voice barely audible over the train's mechanical groaning as it slowed for the next station. A middle-aged black woman standing nearby had finally intervened. Leave the boy alone. He's not hurting anyone. The blonde woman had released Marcus's arm with a dramatic gesture. Oh, so you're encouraging this criminal behavior? He's breaking the law. This is how it starts with candy today, drugs tomorrow. The absurdity of the statement had caused a ripple of murmurs through the car. Marcus had felt his cheeks burn with humiliation as he tried to move further down the aisle, away from the confrontation. But the woman wasn't finished. As the train pulled into the station, she had pulled out her phone and pointedly dialed 3 numbers that made Marcus's blood run cold. Yes, transit police. I need to report an illegal vendor harassing passengers on the Blue Line train approaching Central Station. He's being aggressive and making people uncomfortable. Her eyes had locked with Marcus's as she added, a young black male, about 16, wearing a gray hoodie and carrying a suspicious package. I feel unsafe. The deliberate mischaracterization had left Marcus frozen in place as other passengers exchanged glances. He hadn't been aggressive. He hadn't harassed anyone. The suspicious package was clearly a box of candy bars. But by the time he had processed the malicious intent behind her words, The train doors had opened at Central Station, and two transit police officers were already scanning the car from the platform, responding to the emergency call. Now, as the handcuffs bit into his wrists and his candy lay scattered across the floor, Marcus couldn't stop the tears that streamed down his face. This wasn't supposed to happen. He just wanted to help his mother. The shame of being restrained in public mixed with the terror of what would happen next. Would he be arrested? Would his mother find out this way? Would she have to somehow find money for bail instead of medicine? "Officer, please," he managed between shaky breaths. "It's just candy. For my mom. She's sick." The younger of the two officers, a stocky man with a closely cropped beard, began collecting the scattered bills and change from the floor. Conducting business on MTA property without a license is a violation of City Ordinance 227B. He recited mechanically. All proceeds from illegal vending are subject to confiscation. The blonde woman watched with undisguised satisfaction as the officer stuffed Marcus's hard-earned money into an evidence bag. "I've been reporting these vendors for months," she announced to anyone who would listen. "They come into our public spaces thinking the rules don't apply to them. It's about time something was done." The older officer, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and deep lines around his eyes, maintained his grip on Marcus's arm as he addressed the woman. "Ma'am, you reported an aggressive vendor making threats. This appears to be a minor selling candy." She straightened her designer blouse, indignation flashing across her face. "He was certainly aggressive with me when I questioned his right to be here. I felt threatened." A chorus of disagreement rose from several passengers who had witnessed the entire interaction. The red-haired college student stepped forward, her phone still recording. "That's absolutely not what happened. I've been filming since she grabbed him." "You have no right to record me," the woman snapped, moving to block the camera. "That's a violation of my privacy." "Actually," said an older man in a business suit who had been silently observing the scene, "in public spaces like this subway, there's no expectation of privacy. The young lady has every right to film, especially if she's documenting potential misconduct." The train remained stopped at Central Station, its doors open as more passengers became involved in the unfolding drama. The younger officer finished collecting the scattered money and candy, stuffing everything into separate evidence bags. "We need to take him to the transit office for processing," he said to his partner. The older officer hesitated, looking at Marcus's tear-streaked face, and then at the growing number of passengers pulling out their phones to record the situation. Something in his expression shifted a subtle calculation of risk versus reward, of protocol versus public perception. "What's your name, son?" he asked Marcus, his voice noticeably softer. "Marcus Johnson, sir. I'm 15. "Where do you live, Marcus?" "Westbrook Heights, sir. With my mother. She's sick, that's why I was selling candy. For her medicine." The officer nodded slowly, his eyes moving to the evidence bag containing what couldn't have been more than $70 in crumpled bills and loose change. A decision seemed to form behind his weathered features. "Officer Rodriguez," he addressed his younger partner, "uncuff him. He's a minor. We'll issue a warning and confiscate the unsold merchandise." The blonde woman pushed forward, her face flushed with anger. "You can't just let him go. He was breaking the law. I want to press charges for harassment." The older officer turned to her with a gaze that had grown significantly colder. "Ma'am, filing a false police report is a misdemeanor offense that carries a potential fine of up to $1,000 and up to 1 year in jail. Would you like to revise your statement about feeling threatened by this young man?" Her mouth opened and closed wordlessly for a moment before she recovered. I know my rights. I want to speak to your supervisor. What's your badge number? As this exchange continued, the younger officer reluctantly removed the handcuffs from Marcus's wrists. The teenager rubbed at the red marks they had left, his shoulders still hunched in fear and humiliation. The evidence bags remained firmly in Officer Rodriguez's possession. "Can I have my money back?" Marcus asked quietly. "Please. It's for my mom's medication." The younger officer looked uncomfortable, but shook his head. "Proceeds from illegal vending are—" "Give him back his money, Rodriguez," the older officer interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We're issuing a warning today, not making an arrest." A small cheer went up from the gathered passengers, many of whom were still recording. The college student with the red hair stepped closer to Marcus. "I've got this whole thing on video," she said gently. "My name's Alicia. Would you be okay with me posting this? People should see what happened here." Before Marcus could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. "Excuse me. Coming through." A black woman in her 40s pushed her way through the crowd, her hospital ID badge swinging from a lanyard around her neck. "I'm Tanya Wilson, social worker at City General. Let me talk to this young man." The officer stepped aside as Tanya approached Marcus with professional concern. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her eyes quickly assessing him for any injuries. "No, ma'am," Marcus replied, still shaken. "Good. Now, tell me about your mother. What kind of medication does she need?" As Marcus explained his mother's condition and their financial situation, Tanya nodded with understanding. She pulled out a business card and pressed it into his hand. "My office helps connect families with emergency medication assistance. Call this number tomorrow morning. Ask for me specifically. We'll make sure your mother gets what she needs." The train conductor's voice crackled over the intercom. "This train is delayed due to a police investigation. We apologize for the inconvenience." The blonde woman, sensing that the situation was no longer unfolding to her advantage, attempted to slip away during the announcement. "Oh, no, you don't," said the older officer, stepping into her path. "We need your information for our report, ma'am." "I'm going to be late for an important dinner," she protested, her earlier righteousness replaced by obvious discomfort. "Shouldn't have called 911 with a false report then," muttered a passenger loud enough for everyone to hear. By this point, Officer Rodriguez had returned Marcus's money, minus a few bills that had been trampled beyond recognition in the commotion. The candy had been placed back in the box, though many packages were now dented or damaged. "Thank you," Marcus said softly as he received his earnings. The older officer leaned in close. "Listen, son, I understand why you're doing this, but you can't sell on the subway. It's against regulations. Find another way to help your mom. Okay?" Marcus nodded, clutching the recovered money tightly. The public humiliation still burned, but at least he wouldn't be going home empty-handed. Tanya Wilson placed a protective hand on his shoulder. "I'll make sure he gets home safely," she informed the officers. "And we'll follow up about proper assistance channels for his family." As the officers finally allowed the train to continue its route, taking the blonde woman with them to complete their report, Alicia approached Marcus again. "I've already uploaded the video to Twitter and Instagram," she said. "What happened to you wasn't right. People should know." Marcus glanced at her phone screen and saw that she had captioned the video, "Karen calls cops on black teen selling candy for his sick mom." Subway Karen, false police overreach. Candy Kid. Even in his state of shock, he could see that the view count was already climbing rapidly. "I just wanted to get my mom's medicine," he said, his voice small against the renewed rumbling of the train. Tanya squeezed his shoulder reassuringly. "You will. And maybe now. Something good might come from all this bad." She couldn't have known how prophetic those words would prove to be. By the time Marcus arrived home that evening, accompanied by Tanya, who had insisted on explaining the situation to his mother personally, the video of his handcuffing had already garnered over 50,000 views. Angela Johnson, weak from her illness but burning with maternal indignation, had alternated between holding her son close and expressing her outrage to Tanya. "He's a child trying to help his family, and they handcuffed him like a criminal." Her voice had broken on the last word, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks. "Mrs. Johnson, I want you to know that I'm going to personally ensure your family receives the assistance you're entitled to," Tanya had promised. "What happened today was wrong on multiple levels, but we can use this attention to get Marcus and you the help you need." After Tanya left with promises to return the next day, Angela had held Marcus's face between her trembling hands. "Baby, promise me you won't ever put yourself at risk like that again. No amount of money is worth seeing my child in handcuffs." "But your medicine." "We will figure it out together. That's what family does." She had kissed his forehead, her lips fever-warm against his skin. "Now, let's count this money and see if we can get that prescription filled tomorrow." They had counted $63.47. Not enough for the refill, but closer than they had been that morning. Neither of them had any idea what the next morning would bring. Marcus woke to the insistent buzzing of his phone. Bleary-eyed, he reached for it, expecting to see a text from Jerome asking about yesterday's failed candy venture. Instead, he found 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and hundreds of notifications from social media accounts he rarely used. Rubbing sleep from his eyes, he scrolled through the messages in growing disbelief. The video of his handcuffing had gone viral overnight. Justice for Marcus and Yancho Candy Kid were trending nationwide. News outlets were requesting interviews. Crowdfunding campaigns had been established in his name. His school principal had texted to check on his well-being and offer support. His basketball coach had left a voicemail expressing outrage and solidarity. Most surprising was a message from Alicia, the red-haired college student who had recorded the incident. "Marcus, my video has over 3 million views. A reporter from Channel 7 News wants to interview you. Is that okay? This could help a lot of people understand what happened. Also, someone started a GoFundMe for your mom's medical expenses. It's at $24,000 and climbing. Call me." His hands trembling, Marcus walked to his mother's bedroom to find her already awake, her phone also buzzing incessantly on her nightstand. "Mom," he said, his voice unsteady, "I think something big is happening." Angela nodded, her eyes wide as she looked up from her screen. "Tanya Wilson just called. She said the hospital administration wants to review our case for their charity care program. And Marcus, people are donating money for my treatment." Mother and son stared at each other in stunned silence, as both their phones continued to buzz with notifications. The sunlight streaming through the thin curtains seemed brighter somehow, illuminating dust particles that danced in the air between them, a visual representation of how quickly their world was changing. By noon, Marcus and Angela were seated in their small living room facing a Channel 7 news reporter and camera operator. Tanya Wilson sat beside them, having taken a personal day off work to act as an impromptu media coordinator and advocate. "We're here with Marcus Johnson, the 15-year-old student who was handcuffed by transit police yesterday after attempting to sell candy on the Blue Line subway. The reporter began, her expression professionally concerned. Marcus, can you tell us in your own words what happened yesterday? With Tanya's encouraging nod, Marcus recounted the events: his mother's illness, the financial strain, his decision to sell candy, and the escalation caused by the woman passengers had dubbed Subway Karen. His voice grew stronger as he spoke, the initial nervousness giving way to the simple truth of his experience. I wasn't trying to break any rules, he concluded. I just wanted to help my mom. The reporter turned to Angela, who sat straight-backed despite her obvious fatigue, dignity evident in every line of her face. Mrs. Johnson, your son was trying to raise money for your medication. Can you tell us about your health challenges and the financial burden your family is facing? Angela spoke eloquently about navigating the healthcare system with a chronic illness, about insurance gaps and medication costs, about working reduced hours while trying to maintain her family's stability. I never wanted Marcus to worry about adult problems, she said, her voice catching. He's a good student, a good basketball player, and the best son a mother could ask for. He shouldn't have had to choose between following rules and helping his family survive. The interview continued for nearly an hour, covering the systemic issues that had led to their predicament. When asked about the woman who had called the police, Angela was remarkably measured in her response. I don't know what's in that woman's heart, she said. I don't know what made her look at my son and see a threat instead of a child. But I do know that her actions reflect a larger problem in how some people perceive young black men in this country. My son was selling candy, not committing a crime deserving of public humiliation and handcuffs. After the news crew departed, promising that the segment would air on the evening news, Tanya updated them on the rapidly developing situation. The GoFundMe had surpassed $50,000. The Transit Authority had issued a statement promising an investigation into the incident and a review of vendor policies. The mayor's office had reached out about including Marcus in an upcoming youth advisory panel on community police relations. And, Tanya added with a smile that suggested she had saved the best news for last, I've been in touch with the hospital's patient advocate. They've approved emergency medication assistance for Angela. We can pick up your prescription this afternoon. Fully covered. Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes. Just 24 hours ago, he had been counting candy bars in their bathroom, desperate for a way to earn $87. Now, strangers across the country were rallying behind his family, offering support he couldn't have imagined. There's something else, Tanya said, her expression turning more serious. The woman who called the police, her name is Catherine Winters. She's an executive at Meridian Properties, one of the largest real estate development companies in the city. People have identified her, and there are calls for her employer to take action. Angela frowned. I don't want anyone to lose their job over this. I just want Marcus to be treated with the dignity he deserves. Tanya nodded understandingly. That's very gracious of you, Angela. But public accountability is important too. What happened to Marcus represents a pattern that needs to be addressed. As if on cue, Marcus's phone buzzed with a news alert. Meridian Properties had released a statement acknowledging that they were aware of the incident involving their employee and were reviewing the matter internally. The story continued to unfold with breathtaking speed over the next several days. The Channel 7 interview aired and was picked up by national networks. Marcus and Angela found themselves at the center of a conversation about racial profiling, economic inequality, and healthcare access. The GoFundMe surpassed $100,000 with donations coming from all 50 states and 12 countries. Social media detectives had thoroughly investigated Catherine Winters, unearthing previous complaints about her behavior in public spaces, and highlighting her role at Meridian Properties, which owned several developments that had displaced low-income families in historically black neighborhoods. Subway Karen and Boycott Meridian became linked hashtags as public pressure mounted. 5 days after the subway incident, the Metropolitan Transit Authority held a public meeting to address the growing controversy. The boardroom was packed with community members, activists, and media representatives. Marcus and Angela were given seats in the front row, accompanied by Tanya Wilson and, surprisingly, by Alicia Chen, the college student whose video had catalyzed the entire movement. The MTA chairman, a stern-faced man with carefully chosen words, began by acknowledging the unfortunate incident and promising a thorough review of protocols. His corporate language and reluctance to directly address the racial dynamics at play caused murmurs of dissatisfaction to ripple through the crowd. With all due respect, interrupted a community activist who had been granted speaking time. This wasn't an unfortunate incident. This was a textbook case of racial profiling that resulted in a minor being publicly handcuffed for an infraction that typically results in a verbal warning for white vendors. We need accountability, not platitudes. The room erupted in applause. The chairman adjusted his tie uncomfortably as speakers from various community organizations presented documented evidence of discriminatory enforcement patterns in transit policing. When it was Angela's turn to speak, she rose slowly, still weak from her illness, but strengthened by purpose. The room fell silent as she approached the microphone. "I'm not here to demand punishment," she began, her quiet voice somehow filling the large room. "I'm here to ask for change. My son is a child who was trying to help his family in the only way he knew how. Yes, he broke a rule about vending. But the response to that minor infraction revealed something deeply broken in our system." She paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing. When a white woman can call police claiming to feel threatened by a black child selling candy, and those officers immediately respond with handcuffs instead of questions, we have failed as a community. When a mother must choose between medication and electricity, we have failed as a society. When a 15-year-old feels responsible for solving adult problems, we have failed as a system. Tears glistened in her eyes, but her voice remained steady. "I don't want special treatment. I want equal treatment. I want my son to live in a world where he isn't automatically perceived as a threat. I want accountability from those who wronged him. Yes, but more than that, I want change that ensures this doesn't happen to another child." The silence that followed her words was profound, broken only when Marcus stood to embrace his mother as she returned to her seat. The room erupted in supportive applause that continued for nearly a full minute. What no one expected was who would speak next. From the back of the room, a familiar figure approached the microphone. Catherine Winters, the woman now infamous as Subway Karen, had entered the meeting unnoticed. Her typically perfect appearance was noticeably disheveled. Her hair lacked its usual styled precision. Her eyes were rimmed with evidence of sleeplessness, and her designer clothing had been replaced by a simple blouse and pants. "My name is Catherine Winters," she began, her voice lacking its previous entitlement. A chorus of boos and murmurs swept through the room, forcing her to pause until the chairman called for order. "I am here to address my actions last week on the Blue Line train." She gripped the podium, visibly struggling to maintain her composure. "I have spent the past 5 days watching myself through the eyes of others. I've read thousands of comments condemning me. I've lost my job. I've received threats. My face has become synonymous with racism and privilege." Several audience members called out that she deserved these consequences, but she continued, despite the interruptions. I'm not here to ask for sympathy. I'm here because Mrs. Johnson's words just now made me realize that I need to take full responsibility for what I did. She turned toward Marcus and Angela. I called the police on a child because of my own biases and frustrations that had nothing to do with him. I exaggerated and misrepresented the situation to ensure a response that would validate my sense of control. I put a young man's safety and future at risk because, in that moment, I saw him not as someone's child, but as a symbol of what I perceived as disorder. Tears streamed down her face, removing what remained of her carefully applied makeup. I can offer excuses about having a bad day or feeling unsafe, but the truth is simpler and harder to admit. I saw a young black man and automatically assumed the worst. That is the definition of prejudice. And I enacted that prejudice with the full force of my privilege. The room had grown still, the earlier hostility replaced by a tense attention. Catherine wiped at her tears before continuing. Mrs. Johnson, Marcus, I know that sorry is woefully inadequate, but I am deeply, truly sorry. I cannot undo what I did, but I can commit to never being that person again. I've begun working with an anti-racism educator to understand and dismantle my own biases. I've volunteered to participate in restorative justice programs, and I want to contribute the entirety of my severance package from Meridian to the Johnson family's medical fund. She stepped back from the microphone, her public confession complete. The silence in the room was heavy with the weight of collective processing. After a moment, Angela Johnson slowly rose from her seat and made her way toward Catherine. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the two women stood face to face. I appreciate your apology, Angela said, her voice just loud enough to carry in the quiet room. Accountability is the first step toward healing. But that severance package should go toward a community fund for youth programs and medical assistance for families in need, not just mine. If you're serious about making amends, let your money help prevent other families from ending up in our situation. Catherine nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Yes, of course. Whatever you think is best. Angela extended her hand, and, after a moment of hesitation, Catherine took it. The handshake was brief, but captured by dozens of cameras a moment of human connection that would become as viral as the original confrontation, though for very different reasons. The meeting continued, with the MTA board announcing immediate policy changes. Transit officers would undergo additional training on appropriate responses to minor infractions. A youth vendor program would be piloted to create legitimate opportunities for students to sell approved items at designated stations. And a community oversight committee would be established to review enforcement practices. As the meeting concluded, Marcus found himself surrounded by reporters seeking comments on these developments. With newfound confidence, he addressed their questions thoughtfully, emphasizing his hope that what happened to him would lead to lasting change. Watching her son speak with such poise and purpose, Angela felt a complex mixture of pride and sadness. Pride in the young man he was becoming. Sadness that circumstances had forced him to mature so quickly. In the weeks that followed, the Johnson family's life transformed in ways they could never have anticipated. The medical fund, combined with Catherine Winter's contribution, created the Johnson Family Community Health Initiative, a non-profit organization dedicated to helping families navigate healthcare challenges and financial hardships. Angela, whose health improved significantly once she had consistent access to proper medication, became the organization's first director, working part-time while continuing her recovery. Marcus returned to school a reluctant celebrity. Some classmates treated him with newfound respect. Others seemed uncomfortable around him. His basketball coach made him co-captain, citing his demonstrated leadership under pressure. Teachers who had previously overlooked him now paid special attention to his academic progress. It was a strange new reality to navigate. "Does it ever bother you?" his cousin Jerome asked one afternoon as they walked home from practice. "Everyone knowing you as Candy Kid, instead of just Marcus." Marcus considered the question seriously. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then, I think about all the good that's come from it. Mom's getting better. We don't have to worry about bills right now. And maybe things will be different for the next kid who's just trying to help his family." Jerome nodded thoughtfully. "You change things. 'Cause that's pretty big." "I didn't change things," Marcus corrected him. "Everyone who spoke up changed things. The people who shared the video, who donated money, who demanded better from the system, they're the ones who made a difference. I was just the kid who got caught selling candy." 3 months after the subway incident, the Metropolitan Transit Authority held a ceremony to launch its new Youth Entrepreneur Program, which created legitimate opportunities for students to sell approved items at designated stations, with proceeds benefiting both the students and community programs. Marcus was invited to cut the ribbon alongside the MTA chairman, city officials, and, symbolically, the older police officer who had made the decision to remove his handcuffs that fateful day. As cameras flashed and applause filled the renovated station concourse, Marcus caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd. Catherine Winters stood at a respectful distance, looking markedly different from the polished executive who had called the police on him. She offered a small, hesitant smile when their eyes met. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed, she approached Angela and Marcus cautiously. "I didn't want to intrude," she said. "I just wanted to see the program launch." Angela nodded acknowledgement. "How are you, Catherine?" "I'm learning," she replied. "I've been volunteering at a youth center in my neighborhood. It's been eye-opening. And I've started therapy to work through some of my own issues that contributed to how I behaved that day." Marcus, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "Are people still giving you a hard time?" Catherine looked surprised by his concern. "Some are. But that's not important. What matters is that I'm working to become someone who deserves forgiveness, even if I never fully receive it." Angela placed a gentle hand on Catherine's arm. "Redemption is a journey, not a destination. Keep walking your path." As Catherine walked away, Marcus turned to his mother. "Do you really forgive her?" Angela considered the question carefully before answering. "Forgiveness isn't about excusing what someone did. It's about refusing to let their actions continue to harm you. I choose not to carry the weight of anger toward her. But I will never forget what her actions revealed about the world you're growing up in." She wrapped an arm around his shoulders. "My job is to help change that world, not to hold grudges against individuals who are products of it." The new Youth Entrepreneur Program became a model for similar initiatives across the country. Marcus, who had once sold candy out of desperation, now mentored other students participating in the program. His story was included in a documentary about community policing and racial bias. Angela's health continued to improve, and the nonprofit she directed expanded to serve hundreds of families facing medical and financial crises. 6 months to the day after Marcus had been handcuffed on the Blue Line, he stood at the podium in City Hall, addressing the newly formed Community Oversight Committee for Transit Enforcement. "I never wanted to be a symbol or a hashtag," he told the assembled officials and community representatives. "I was just a kid trying to solve a problem too big for me to handle alone. What I've learned since then is that no problem should be too big for a community to solve together." He gestured to the diverse committee members seated before him. This committee exists because people refused to look away when they saw injustice. They used their phones to record, their voices to protest, their votes to demand change, and their compassion to support my family when we needed it most. The room was silent as he continued, his voice steady and clear. The work you're doing here matters. Every policy you review, every recommendation you make, every oversight function you perform, it all contributes to creating a world where kids like me don't have to choose between following rules and helping their families survive. A world where people aren't judged by their appearance or age or race, but by the content of their character and the context of their actions. In the audience, Angela watched her son with tears of pride glistening in her eyes. Beside her sat Tanya Wilson, Alicia Chen, and several other key figures who had emerged as allies during their journey. Even Officer Peterson, the older police officer who had removed Marcus's handcuffs that day, was present in his capacity as the newly appointed liaison between Transit Police and the Oversight Committee. I don't want what happened to me to define my life, Marcus concluded, his gaze sweeping across the attentive faces before him. But I do want it to matter. I want it to be one of those moments that pushes us all to do better, to be better for each other. Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to get home safely. The standing ovation that followed his words lasted for nearly 2 full minutes. As Marcus returned to his seat beside his mother, she embraced him tightly, whispering in his ear, "You've always been my hero, baby. Now the world gets to see why." Later that evening, as they walked home together, under a sky painted with the golden hues of sunset, Angela asked her son a question that had been on her mind throughout the ceremony. With all that's happened, all the changes and opportunities coming your way, what do you want for your future now? Marcus considered the question seriously as they passed the subway station where, half a year earlier, his life had changed forever. Through the entrance, he could see students in program uniforms manning the official vendor kiosks that had replaced the informal economy of candy sellers and performers. I think, he said slowly, I want to be a lawyer. Maybe work on civil rights cases, or help families navigate the system, or maybe go into public health policy so people don't have to choose between medicine and food. He shrugged, a gesture that reminded Angela that despite his poise and eloquence, he was still very much a teenager. I've got time to figure it out. Angela squeezed his hand, her heart full. The journey had been unexpected and often painful. But watching her son grow into his purpose made every difficult moment worthwhile. Their story had become part of something larger than themselves, a catalyst for change in a system that had needed changing for generations. As they climbed the steps to their apartment building, Marcus paused to hold the door for an elderly neighbor carrying groceries. It was a small gesture of kindness, unremarkable in its normalcy. Yet in that simple act, Angela saw the essence of who her son had always been and would continue to be. Regardless of hashtags or headlines, a compassionate young man who noticed when others needed help and didn't hesitate to offer it. The door closed behind them, shutting out the noise of the city. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. But for tonight, they were simply a family returning home together, their journey still unfolding, their story still being written, their impact rippling outward in ways they might never fully comprehend. In the months and years that followed, the Candy Kid incident would be referenced in case studies, policy reforms, and community organizing efforts across the country. But in their apartment in Westbrook Heights, Marcus Johnson would simply be a young man working toward his future, supported by a mother whose love and wisdom had taught him the most important lesson of all, that true change begins with individuals who refuse to accept the world as it is, and instead work tirelessly to create the world as it should be.